Hey everyone, it's Nick with Comic Experience Sci-Fi. We're at Great Lakes Comic Con, February 2024. I'm here with legendary Marvel writer and artist Bob Budiansky, and we're glad to see you. Tell us first, how did you get started as a professional in the comics industry?
I went to college, and a friend of mine from college got a job at Marvel. And when he quit his job, he said, he knew I was interested in that kind of stuff. He said, would you like to interview for my job as an entry-level editorial assistant? And I said, sure. And I dropped out of graduate school in transportation engineering, and I took an entry-level job at Marvel as an editorial assistant.
What year was that?
1976.
Oh, okay, so you were there quite early, because I know you were doing the writing in the 80s.
I was there for 20 years.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, so I did a lot of different things over those 20 years.
Well, you didn't mention anything about being a comic enthusiast yourself before you took that job. Did you grow up?
I grew up reading comics. I love drawing comic-style artwork for myself. And got to high school, I stopped reading comics. Got to college, got interested in them again. And I was the graphic arts editor for our student newspaper, so I was doing a lot of artwork for the student newspaper. So yes, definitely had an interest. At the time, my friend approached me and said, "You want to interview for my job?"
Okay, what comics did you enjoy?
When I was growing up, I read Justice League of America, Green Lantern, The Flash, Superman. Then I got a little older. I started reading Fantastic Four and Spider-Man, started moving over to Marvel. And then, like I said, eventually I gave it up. And then I got back into the 70s when I was in college. I learned about Conan. I discovered there's a whole new brand of sword and sorcery comics that did not exist when I was a kid. So I got into that.
Okay, and then once you got that sort of entry position at Marvel, how did your career evolve from there?
Well, there were opportunities to do artwork, and I was still not really at the level where I could do professional artwork for Marvel, but I was in an ideal position to learn. So I was working with my boss had a lot of artwork experience. He was a great artist himself, and I worked with art directors like Marie Severin and John Romita Sr. And so I was just exposed all left and right to people who were always giving me advice, great advice. So I was able to rise to the point where eventually I was able to quit my staff job, become a full-time freelance artist drawing Ghost Rider for Marvel. And then I went back on staff as a full editor.
Were you a little starstruck to be working for John Romita, obviously somebody you knew from reading comics?
Yeah. I was amazed that here I was a kid reading his comics, a few years earlier. Now I'm working with him, and in some cases, some of these people wound up working for me. Like I mentioned, Green Lantern was one of my favorite comic books when I was a kid. Gil Kane was the artist on that, and in the 90s, he was working for me on Spider-Man when I was a Spider-Man editor.
That's amazing. It's kind of like I read Bob Budiansky as a kid. Now here I am interviewing him. 40th anniversary of the Transformers comic book. How did you become involved with that?
So I was a staff editor at Marvel by this point in 1983, and Marvel had made a deal with Hasbro Toys to develop Transformers into a comic book property and come up with a storyline for it. And my boss, the editor-in-chief, Jim Shooter, he wrote a treatment for the Transformers, gave it to Hasbro. I guess they approved it. And then he went about hiring one of the editors, who had a senior editor who had a lot of writing experience, to develop all the characters. And for whatever reasons, that didn't work out. And then he went down from one editorial office to another, asking if anybody would take these 26 characters and come up with names for them and profiles over the weekend before Thanksgiving of 1983. And one after the other, they turned him down because it was a crazy assignment. And he finally got to me out of desperation, because I was not known as a writer-editor, I was known as an artist-editor. And he said, "Bob, you want to give it a try?" And I said, "Sure, I'm not doing anything this weekend." So over the weekend, 2 of the names we had already. I came up with 24 other names for the other 20, so we had a total of 26 characters, wrote the profiles. Jim Shooter liked my work, gave it to Hasbro to approve. They reviewed it, they liked it, and from then on, I was the guy for the next 5 years at Marvel developing Transformer characters as new ones came aboard, and I wrote the comic book for about 4 years, and edited the 4-issue miniseries that it began with, so I had a lot of involvement over those years. By the end of that span, I had named about 250 characters for Hasbro.
That's amazing. I was in high school at the time, and I was working at a toy store, and of course, then the Transformer toys were made out of metal. They were very cool. How did you feel about the idea of tying a toy line to, was there any artistic, like, this is selling out or anything like that? Or you're like, no, this is a great opportunity to create a new world of characters?
Oh, I looked at it as a great opportunity. I mean, I know the whole point of it, the whole point of Hasbro coming to Marvel to put out a comic book was to help them sell toys. But that was not my concern. My concern was I was presented with an opportunity, it was a challenge, I had to come up with all these crazy names and all these crazy ideas about who these characters were and what they did, and I had some experience already. I worked at Marvel by this point, for like 7 years or so, so I had some knowledge of these things. And so I just thought it was a wonderful opportunity. And what made it fun for me to write Transformers comic book was it was not connected to the Marvel Universe. So I really was able to just expand in any direction I wanted to go, not worrying about, well, we already have, these characters in this world and this dimension and all. I didn't have to worry about any of that stuff.
What's interesting about that is Micronauts and ROM were toy lines, but they were in the Marvel Universe.
Yeah, and actually we did touch upon the Marvel Universe in a couple of Transformers comic books. We were very naive back then. We just said, oh, let's try this, let's try that. But generally we were separate, and we remained separate for that most of that time, yeah.
What do you think about Transformers being, to this day, as huge as it is?
I think it's great. I think it's kind of amazing. I mean, I'm kind of used to it by now, but when I was writing the comic book, my only concern was I have to finish this story so I could start next month's story. I wasn't thinking that 30, 40 years later, people would still care about this stuff. Comic book is a very transitory medium. You read one month, you put down the comic, you read the next month's issue. You don't think about, like, in 30, 40 years, they're going to still be reprinting your stuff, referring to your stuff, interviewing me about my stuff. It just wasn't in my head back then. I was just worried about what was I going to do next month. So when it came back in a big way, especially with the movies in the 2000 aughts, I thought, it's amazing. Not only are they making movies, they're making live action movies. I would never have expected that.
Computer special effects.
Yeah. It just, just the fact that it had so much life still in it all these years later, and I think it's great. And it's great for me because I did something that people still remember, and they seem to still cherish it, and they come up to me and ask me questions about why did I do this and how did I do that, and I'm always happy to speak to all the fans of the work, and it's great.
And lastly, are you working on anything these days, or are you just doing the circuit and meeting fans?
This is, as my daughter would put it, this is my side hustle.
Okay.
So I do conventions, I do some commissions, but I have a day job that has nothing to do with any of this, and I still have that job and keeps me sane.
Thanks for talking to us, Bob. We appreciate it.